interview room on this St. Patrick's Day. They're playing my song. Got my green on. Last name of McDonough. Can't beat that. I hope everybody's doing well. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm having a little audio problem over here. Tonight, we've got, as you can tell, Dr. Gary Brucato is with us tonight, and also Michael Morin, Rachel Morin's brother. And if this is your first time here, we'd like to welcome you, all of our subs, all of our members, and our Patreon members. We are certainly grateful for each and every one of you, as well as all of our mods, Mimi J2, Maui Girl, and Teresa M. We certainly do love and appreciate each of you, ladies, as well as missing Miss Sophia. If you're watching us, Miss Sophia, you are in our thoughts and our prayers. If this is the first time you've ever been to the interview room, we only ask one thing, and that is you subscribe, and that you also pass this information around through your social networks, wherever they might be. We are appreciative of just that. And because the topics that we talk about here are extremely sensitive, and we always want to be sensitive in relationship to the family, the victims, the investigation, the investigators, as well as anybody else involved. So we want to please welcome tonight, if this is your first time here, Dr. Gary Brucato. He's a visiting scholar at Boston College, where he collaborates with Dr. Ann Burgess, Dr. Victor Petrecka on forensic research. He studies, among other things, how violent thoughts and actions emerge in psychotic versus non-psychotic persons. Gary is the co-author of the Columbia University Mass Murder Database, which is the largest in the world, with over 119 years worth of data. And he's also the co-author of this book right here. It's either in the #1 or the #2 slot on Amazon. You can find it there, and it's called The New Evil: Understanding the Emergence of Modern and Violent Crime. There are 22 categories that this book lays out. And when I had Gary on here, we've talked about the suspect in this particular case before they, obviously they haven't caught him yet, but Gary's got a pretty good feel for these types of individuals and the way they act and work. If this is your first time here, I have worked, I am the director of criminal investigations for the Cold Case Foundation. I also work on a daily basis as an investigator I'm working through some Native American problems in terms of women that have been murdered. I have over 500 death investigations under my belt. 300 of those are murders. And I had a 90% solvability rate. So it's not my first rodeo like the next guy, but we want to welcome Michael here. Thank you so much, Michael. And I'm getting some feedback, so I don't know if one of you has an open line that we're getting feedback through that line. I think it's you, Mike. You may be getting some feedback through, but that's okay. It will work. We'll work it out. So welcome, Michael. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, bud. And Gary, good to see you again tonight, as always.
Yeah, Chris, I want to wish all of our audience members who might celebrate a happy St. Patrick's Day. I have always had a very special love of the Irish people. I think as an Italian American, there's always, I think, a bond between us because we were the outcasts and the
Gary and I are paisans.
Well, I think listen, we were a little outcasted and did a lot of the blue collar work that built this country, and I think there's a very special bond between Irish and Italian American people. So I've always had a great love of them. Michael, your last name could be Scottish, Irish, could be a bunch of things. What kind of name is it?
The name Morin is French.
Oh, Morin, like a real. Oh, because I know that name exists also in Scotland, but it's pronounced very differently. Ah, so you're a French origin. I always wondered. Pure French origin?
Partially, yeah. It's a bunch of different.
Fascinating. Cool.
Values.
That always interested me, Chris.
It's we are so grateful that you and others in your family have picked up the torch for your sister. But Gary and I are just humbled that you trust us with, putting some of this information out there in terms of, from our perspective. It's not, for the record for everybody. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And not only that, these are just our opinions when we talk about them. However, it doesn't mean they're correct, but it doesn't mean also they're incorrect yet. Until they gather a suspect and he ends up telling, why he did what he did, then we are approaching this from two sides, one from an investigative analysis side and the other from a forensic analysis side. So we've got the psychology, and hopefully we can connect some of these dots. Now, the last time you were here, Mike, both you and Matt, her ex-husband, Rachel's ex-husband, we talked about a geographic profile that was put together at the head of the trail where Rachel parked her car on August 5th to go down that trail in the mom pop. Tonight, we're going to try to take a different perspective. We've seen from the front entrance into those tunnels. And tonight, we asked you the last time that you were here if you would kind of maybe gather some video. And you painstakingly, went out there, brother, and did that. And so tonight we're going to bring the audience here and everybody in chat. We're going to bring you from the other perspective, from the other side coming into the tunnel, and also from the side where, and this is a hypothetical, if the suspect were to have exited the opposite side of the tunnel, then would have been the suspect's view. So we're hoping to do a full dimensional view of what this area looks like. Right now we have, a one-dimensional view inside from the front, from the car where she parked to the tunnel. And then there's a hypothesis that he could have exited the same way he came in. There are going to be a lot of variances in relationship to that, footprints in relationship to, data. And this is my experience speaking, just like in the Murdoch case, they had a lot of triangulation, a lot of stuff that could have been presented that could have put him in certain places. But triangulation data, like everything else, remember, has to be pinged off of three-sided towers, cell phone towers, et cetera, which kind of leaves out there, a wide variance of possibilities. But my question is going to be tonight, from my approach here and with Gary, is where does he originate? Not necessarily how does he escape, but what is the possibility of his origin? Why is he near those tunnels? From a geographical profile, we had your friend, Mr. McGregor, I believe, last time. It was a super great guy, smart guy. His approach was very clear that, in his opinion, the guy came out through the front, and he had a variety of reasons for that. However, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is the why question. Investigators get into trouble when they always ask how. How did this happen? How did this guy get there, etc.? Where investigators don't get into trouble is they ask the question, why? Why is this guy here? Why is this guy selecting this particular circumstance? And why is that to his advantage? And so I think, the last time we spoke, I'm going to put this up in here. This was the particular path that goes to the drainage ditch that your sister took And this is from McGregor, so he's give him full credit here. And so the question is, does the suspect go back out immediately the same way that he pulled your sister in? Okay. Or is it possible, as a hypothesis, that he could have gone through and gone out to the other side? And if there's a digital footprint relationship to that, then we would have to establish where 3 cell phone towers are in relationship to the geographic region here. Okay. And if that's the case, then the question is, why is that a possibility? Or why is he on the other side of the freeway here, the 2 roads here? Because there are multiple tunnel systems through that drainage. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah. I mean, the large culverts, like the one my sister was found in, there's 2 sets of those.
Okay. So this is critical information that I know the investigators have taken into consideration. But, one of the things that we're going to talk about, and I want everybody to see, I'm going to first run some of the first video from the last time. And this would be Rachel arriving to go walking on the path and the trail. I've done a little homework since the last time we were here. This is a very popular area in terms of, pedestrian traffic, locals. It's just not something, a particular path that a non-local or somebody that wasn't familiar with that area would just kind of pick up on and drop into. So that gives us a little insight in relationship to the familiarity with this geographic region. And McGregor talked about it the last time, which I agreed personally that he's right on target. But this subject had to be into that area for a particular reason. And this is where the why question then starts to come in. Okay? Why is this guy hanging out in this region? Now, from this particular side, it just looks like a regular residential situation. Okay, there's some houses, people walking on the path like everybody else. Okay? But on the other side, we're going to see some very interesting psychological things. There's going to be places where yoga studios. There's going to be a workout place. There's going to be all types of various small companies that potentially would hire individuals to do manual labor. There's going to be a horse stable, horse farms on the other side. Okay. So why is the suspect picking this side of the tunnel system? That's one question I think I want to put out there and propose. Okay. Because this side here really, it's a plus or minus for that individual. But when we get up towards the tunnel here, and by the way, thank you guys so much for doing this, you and Matt. And this is the first one that we played the other day. But I'm going to let this thing run, and then we're going to get through to the tunnel itself. When you were going here, what was going through your mind, Michael?
I mean, I've kind of built up a mental barrier in a way. So it's just kind of going through the motions of the groundwork I've already laid out. Because I had gone there so many times and put myself in, tried to think of, if I was the killer. But just recently, when I go on there, it's just kind of mechanical. I just have a list of things. But yeah, so.
Okay, so there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, not so much going on. up there.
Okay, so this is the area here that is believed your sister was taken off of that path and then pulled in towards those tunnels that you're going to be walking towards there. Gary, when you and I first spoke about this, help us understand again, what do you feel potentially could be the psychological edge that this particular offender would be looking for?
Well, in the most basic way, I don't think there could be much of a question that we're dealing with somebody who has the personality structure of a serial offender with sexual motivations. My guess, based on what we've seen, is this is a person who has a personality that is kind of impulsive, angry, a little bit cruel, arrogant, sour grapes about certain things that he hasn't had in life, feels like something of an outsider, is envious of people who have home and love and happiness, and feels totally entitled to take whatever he wants, and seems to have a kind of a tendency to think of women like a kind of a mass, where they're all sort of one big group, interchangeable group that he has anger toward and feels he has to take what he wants from. And what I think you have to imagine is individual where he would build up to this offense by some period of doing increasingly audacious things. Like, we know that there was a home invasion where there was some aggression there. I'm convinced, I'm sure you are, Chris, that there was probably at least an intention of some sexual offense in that home invasion. I mean, wouldn't you say, Chris? I mean, that seems pretty probable. I think this is a person, if not captured, would continue honing an MO. It looks like he's been kind of experimental. From a psychological perspective, he looks an awful lot like offenders that set up an ambush and then blitz someone and pull them into an isolated area to enact a fantasy. More often than not, there's sexual assault. When you're looking at bludgeoning offenses, there are pretty specific ways that people are killed, which I won't get into because they can be pretty upsetting. But the fact of the matter is that the elimination of the person for such an offender is generally to eliminate a witness, or because there's a sense of them being, of just discarding, what you have objectified. But for some people, that act of killing is part of the arousal. I think it's impossible to say which kind we're dealing with here, but so far the evidence suggests to me the primary motivation was to achieve sexual gratification and then eliminate the person afterward.
Yeah, I would agree 1,000%.
Like, to me, right? Because when the killing of an individual is part of the thrill, usually it's protracted. There's a torture element or some other thing there that is done to really kind of enjoy that and to sexualize that. So I think, to me, this is a sexual assault, probably followed by elimination of a witness. And I think that we're not dealing with a brilliant man. We're dealing with somebody who, has some comfort in this area, and has probably gotten lucky a few times, and has people here and there that are probably kind of giving him a few bucks or helping him or whatever, because you can't be living out in the wilderness or something for all this time. I mean, he's obviously got a nest somewhere. And I think he's very transient. I think he could strike anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if he's linked by DNA to offenses that are really far away from here. Yeah. Transient, and that goes along with that quality of having no home. That I think is the source of this guy's bitterness and anger. It's typical of that kind of offender.
So let's ask ourselves, Michael and everybody in the chat, let's ask ourselves, this particular area here, this tunnel, this is where your sister was taken. Why does this guy know this tunnel? That's the mystery question that last time you were here we discussed in relationship to how in the world do you get this tunnel in your mind and you recognize this is going to be a place that you, if you're on the hunt, and that's what he was doing, why is he selecting this geographic area here? Because this is not it's a familiarity with the area, but this is a specific location that this individual has selected, almost a Ted Bundy selection. But even some of his stuff, right, Gary, was random in nature, that it just, opportunity presented itself. But this guy, during that time, was specific in relationship to hanging out on that trail system somewhere in the woods, obviously, where he concealed himself. So he has enough, consciousness of guilt to know, okay, I've got to be hiding over here. Okay? And then I've got to take the advantage of, as she's coming through here, or whoever comes through here.
Right. But Chris, it's important to emphasize that the difference between this guy and a Ted Bundy, because with Bundy was very slick interpersonally. And for Bundy, part of the psychology I've always thought was that he wanted a person to sort of go with him because of he had finagled the person by, saying, oh, could you help me with my, put my sailboat on top of the car? I've got a cast on. Oh, can you? And after he bamboozled you, he would attack you. And I always thought part of the psychology for Bundy was that he was somebody who had believed that his whole life that the woman he thought was his sister. I mean, he thought that the woman who turned out to be his biological mother was his sister. And he was very cheated by that. And he also believed that this very attractive woman that he had on a pedestal really loved him, and she abandoned him. And in that kind of maelstrom of feeling that he had believed and trusted these people, they hurt him. The idea is to go out, find a woman who believes you, that you lure by getting her to trust you, and then you hurt her, because the whole thing that made him feel small and pathetic was that he trusted and then got bopped on the head, right? So now he does it. You find some woman who trusts you, and then you hurt her, and now she's the fool in your mind, right? But what I think is with this offender in the Rachel Morin case is that I think either he didn't speak English very well, right, or wasn't particularly adept at schmoozing, getting somebody to kind of go with him. That's more the type of person that would use blunt force or a weapon to lure somebody to the isolated. Then the similarities begin, where once the person is isolated, the mask comes off, the aggression comes out, etc. But for me, I think what we're dealing with here is somebody that wasn't going to chat with you first. In fact, there was no interest in that psychological, just animal, totally animal, ambush. I wouldn't even.
No thought process in terms of no conscious. No. It's just a matter of, it's either her or me, literally. And one of the things, it's interesting you said that, Gary, because as you know, just last week I was in the jail talking to a guy, and he said, look, it was either her or me. And I think this guy, would you, am I off base here, Gary, with, from a psychological edge? I think this guy's kind of like that, right? I mean, he's just in and he's going to take care of it. Now, before you answer that,
after the deed was done, I think the point was that, either she was putting up quite a fight, or, he just figured, I don't want to get in trouble, and did what he did. There are other things that could have happened that I really want to know about. What happened to her phone? Did he take, anything off out of her pocket? What else did he do? I don't know. Right. But you got to think of somebody who, once he's done that, would be in a kind of survival mode, right? Because he needs money, he's got to get around, he needs, whatever. So, because I'm still very puzzled, unless he's being kept somewhere, I don't understand how he supports himself or what he's doing. And I hope, Chris, that is a segue into something.
That's why we're here.
I've learned to read those thoughts of yours.
So, Michael, explain what's going on here. So this is a new video, everybody. Michael was gracious enough, I just can't imagine, your thought process, but he was gracious enough to go down there. And these are people walking on the path. And this is kind of the perspective from looking through the eyes of the offender. We asked him to go down there with the camera. I asked him, look through the eyes of the offender. I want you to see what the offender sees. Now, at that time, this was, green. It was foliage everywhere. You can't really see. So the path, what Michael's seeing here are people walking by. So walk us through from your thought process, Mike, what you are filming here.
Yeah, so this actually is a video from, it wasn't recent. Yeah, so this is just a little bit of ways away from the tunnel. And yeah, you can just look right through and you can see, whoever is walking by there. So, and then I just move up a little bit and you can't tell very well with the camera and everything. It's actually not as far as it looks.
Well, and one thing you can see is there's an actual walking path right there. Yep, you can see that the leaves are stomped down. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not, it is very close. This is probably about where, if that was hypothetically your sister coming down here, and he's closer to that trail. And what Gary and I believe, it's a blitz, right? And then he's pulling her back.
Or a gun.
Or a gun. Yeah, or something.
Most common, yeah.
Yep. But he gets her back down through this trail here. And then when he gets, to the tunnel, this is from the perspective of the side of where the crime was committed. Okay. And it's this tunnel to the left. And why is this guy hanging out at this particular area on this side? Now, we knew that at the time, a week or so before, there was a fair going on. And we're going to get to that here in a minute. There was a report of somebody hanging out on that trail just after the fair ended. Now, there weren't any carnival rides or anything like that at the fair. However, it was an agricultural fair with animals. It was held on the other side of those tunnels. There's horse farms over there. There were horses or cows and sheep and all the other stuff taking place at this annual fair, and it's every year. Up until last year, 2023, they used to have carnival rides. So you had, carnival folks coming in and out of that area, that geographic region. And this is Matt out there on the road, showing it, or on the path. So it's not that far. It's not that far from the tunnel. And so he had the position of advantage, 100%. So we know a little bit about his personality just based on this alone, from the tunnel to the street.
But Chris, the one thing I'm confused about is there any area around the tunnel that is authentic wilderness, that is wild, where there's animals or things like that? Or is it all kind of like this, that's, sort of, there's too much population nearby, there wouldn't really be much wildlife? I mean, do you know, Michael? Is there an area behind the tunnel, for example, where you might have foxes, bears, animals, things like that? Or is it's just kind of, it's too urban around it?
Yeah, there's foxes, deer, squirrels, birds. We don't really have any bears around here. We've had some sightings, sparse, but typically they're not around the area. It's too populated.
Mm-hmm. So you'd have to be pretty comfortable in a wilderness area to hang out. But I'm just trying to picture if somebody went into that more forested area. For example, I wouldn't be comfortable to go, particularly at night, to go into an area where there were animals and things like. I mean, of course, I'm a bad example. I mean, I'd be annoyed there wasn't a tablecloth, on the rocks, and what you say, and utensils. But Chris, don't you think it tells you something psychologically about a person if they have comfort with that? It tells you a lot about the kind of background they came from, how much time they would have spent, how resourceful they are, how confident they are that they could handle something that attacks them or live off of whatever they have to. I mean, do you know, Chris, do you have any sense of how wild the areas he could have headed into if he went?
Well, this is right near the after the crime. So this is the type of foliage that was taking place at that time.
Okay.
And so, but if we look at this, he's very comfortable in this environment.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, I wouldn't be. I mean, I think
extremely comfortable.
Tell you something about somebody's psychology.
Which means I go back to this Central America / Mexico, in my opinion, based on the LA situation connection somewhere. Okay, this is the type of terrain that you're going to find down in Guatemala, San Salvador, Belize. This is the type of environment that folks operate in. It's no big deal. A lot of rain, a lot of trees, a lot of stuff like this. And so that's why I always felt that the tunnel system, he selected that tunnel. He had to have selected that tunnel system, but for his own comfort. But why? Why is he taking her in here? I mean, the obvious answer is, just if we just think out loud, it's not rocket science. Well, that gives him the most advantage, blah, blah, blah. He can't be seen. She can't be seen. Concealment. But there's a deeper reason for this from my perspective. Okay? Not only did he, take her into this system, and this is drone footage from Doug McGregor of the entranceway into that tunnel system.
Right. But Chris, can I just make a very comment is that if there turns out to be truth to my hypothesis that this is a person who is bitter, partly because he's never really had a home, stability, cleanliness, etc., there's also an enormous symbolism to taking a person out of a privileged world and dragging them into the kind of filthy environment you've had to be in your whole life. Because remember, the key to these offenses is to always think, how is this person leveling the playing field through the act, right? So one of the things you want to think of in this case is that it's also a way of saying, like, I'm now going to bring you down into this kind of filth world that I'm in. So that I think that again, I put all these facts together and I start to picture a person where underneath sexual motivation, aggression toward women, entitlement, etc., is a deeply pathetic person who's transient and has never had a sense of privilege or home, which matches the whole hypothesis we've had for a long time that he may not be documented or, may have grown up in some kind of rural situation. Chris, I know you've had the impression that this is a person from a rural place who's like a trade worker or worked with animals or farming or something like that. Do you maintain that hypothesis?
I do, and because let's just take for an example what McGregor's thinking here and what others potentially could be thinking, myself included. I mean, it's a possibility, right? We have to keep it on the table. Let's say he comes out through the front, the same way he pulls her in, and there's the trail, there's the bend in the trail, and so he would have to pull her back into that tunnel system, and everything about her victimology and everything about her personality is she's a fighter. She's a scrapper. Okay? So he's got to maintain control as well as maintain the fact that she's not going to be heard and that he's going to be over 100%, taking care of her, i.e. hurting her very violently. And so he's got to pull her back into that tunnel system. And this is the right side of the split roads there. We'll see that a little better here as we get into this a little bit deeper. And so if he comes out, hypothetically, and this is his escape route, I don't see him going back towards the cars which is straight in a straight line up that path the way Rachel came. There's too much exposure. Her car's up there. There's just too many problems there. I could see him turning right and going down this path. And then, of course, you would have triangulation if there was a digital footprint, if he had her phone, if she had a phone. I can't remember. I think she did have a phone, right, Michael? I don't recall.
She did.
Okay, so if her phone's not back there and he took it, as a hypothesis, as a trophy or something, whatever, which is a stupid move, number one. And if this guy took this much time, to plan this out and to play this out for this geographic attack, if he took this much time, he had to be thinking about cell phones. He had to be. Okay. So if in fact that's the case, then you're going to have a digital footprint on this side. Again, for me, Gary, going back to your question, why is he selecting this side for the attack? I mean, it's almost, if he's transient in nature, okay, and he's picked this particular place, then he's making a huge mistake here by bouncing back into the same area that he just came from. Why would he be doing that if he's taken all the time to prepare for the strike?
But remember, Chris, you are a person with, who thinks more like a chess player. This person is more impulsive. And I think when you try to impose your more higher order way of thinking over it, it seems illogical. But remember that this is a person who is operating more, on a kind of a attention deficit level, where everything is impulse, and anything that shoots up that spinal cord, he does it. So I'm not sure that he would make a decision based on wisdom. I think, but I think if we were thinking of him as intelligent, it would be pretty strange to do that, right? I mean, and remember that the essence of this person is he feels invisible. So as a consequence, it's a weakness of his that he doesn't realize that he isn't invisible, and that he will leave traces, and he does have an impact on, and leave evidence that he was there, but he doesn't think he is visible. That his self opinion is, is his undoing. So just as, when he compensates with the arrogance, it's his undoing too. So, so is that mixture of thinking that you're floating through the world and no one even knows you're alive that gets you busted.
Okay. So on the other side of the two tunnel systems, now there's two tunnel systems. That initial tunnel system that Michael's shown us there. And then there's a secondary tunnel system on the other side that shows us. Okay. I'm sorry. I just got a text message. All right. So
I'm loving these visuals, Chris. This gets right to the heart of your point about Koberger, about why you need the house. You need the visuals. Because this brings this to life.
Yeah. So if we look at this visual here for a moment, this is a screen, right, that we pulled up. If you look at to the right over here, it says Hartford County Equestrian Center. So on the opposite side of those tunnels is, a place where horses are kept. Okay. My question is, all right, does this even fit with this particular guy? Okay. And why, again, I'm trying to figure out, why is this guy over on that side, the opposite side? And you'll notice at the bottom of this particular screen here, okay, this one, you see the split there in the road? Okay. You see the red dot in the upper right-hand corner up there? That's where Rachel parks her car. Okay. And then if we take another view here and we come down, you can follow the trail and it gets to that split in the road. And just where there's the split, there's kind of like this little pond thing. Okay. so you've got a set of tunnels going through, which Michael showed and Matt showed us and McGregor showed us last time. But then you have a secondary set. So I started thinking, okay, this secondary set hypothesis, what's on the other side over there? And if so, do you have access to get to where Rachel was abducted and murdered? And the answer, it turns out, is yes, you do. So then I started thinking, okay, well, if this guy is, not the sharpest tool in the shed, as you're talking about, Gary.
Right. It's at least average, but not brilliant. Right.
Right. Okay. If that's the case, then what kind of things would be going on that would attract him? Why would he be in this area? And so the second hypothesis is, okay, I learned about this right here, the 36th annual Hartford County Fair, July 22nd through the 29th. Now, this is an agricultural fair. That means if you have worked around horses, sheep, goats, animals, cows, yeah, it's a 4-H problem, as well, right? For kids in high school and that kind of stuff, okay? But in California, where, Southern California specifically, and out in the valley, there's a tremendous amount of agricultural business. And it's mostly driven by the type of personality, I think, that could put this guy in that area. Now, I don't know that, okay? But I'm trying to...
When did you say it started? When did the fair start?
Well, it started July 22nd through the 29th. But there's one report of somebody hanging out a couple of days after this fair on that trail. Enough to the point where they reported it to the police. I read the news article.
And the home invasion in LA, what's the date?
I forget off the top of my head. Maybe somebody in chat can remind us. I'm sorry, Michael, do you know by chance?
Yeah, I think it was March 26th or
Okay.
26th or 27th. It was
Yeah.
late night, early morning.
Okay, so you read my mind, Gary. I've been doing that, trying to figure out, I know. I've been trying to figure out, okay, what, are there horse, problems out there? We got the Del Mar Fair or the Del Mar Racetrack in San Diego County, the Belmont Track in LA. I mean, there's a lot of stuff over there. And so when I saw the horse area, I thought to myself, man, is that a possibility? And also then this is the other thing that struck me. How does this guy build up his fuel, Gary?
Right.
Well, guess what? There's a yoga studio right there.
When you say fuel, I assume you mean getting himself sexually aroused and
Yeah.
trolling. Yes.
And you see this little curve going down from the apartment complex there to the right, the far right?
Mhm.
That's the entrance to the Mom Paw Trail.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, certainly it would have been fueling. I mean, but it could be anywhere. But even watching people jog can be a kind of fueling. But he certainly is getting himself. Or we know from other offenders that that's what they do.
Okay, so it gets better. You see the pools up there at the top, right?
Yeah.
Within a block and a half away from the trail, and that's a workout center.
Hmm.
So I asked Michael, I said, look, I want to see the perspective from this side of the highway towards the tunnels and towards the pedestrian bridge, i.e. walkway. And so Michael was gracious enough to go down there to give us a good look on, there's that path right there, the Z looking thing. And Michael was gracious enough to go down there. This is a view looking towards that path, or going towards the back of that apartment complex. And these are the, now this is another interesting thing. So you have a solar company here. You have, looks like, I can't remember what that was to the left, Mike. Was that an electrical company of some sort? I mean, construction of some sort?
Yes, some design and build company, construction.
Okay. On the side your sister was found, how many of these places are nearby like this?
I mean, it's not like a industrial center like this at all. So it's just like small shops, you know, and then you have downtown Bel Air, but nothing like this.
So over on that side is kind of, you know, a little higher end. And on this side, you've got a lot of maybe blue collar workers over here, for lack of a better term.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. This is where I would be on this side over here, right? Work with a solar company or something, right? Because I love to work outdoors. And as you know, before I was a cop, I did all that stuff. So this is the kind of thought process. I was like, okay, why is this guy in South Central? What brings him to that neighborhood? Because that neighborhood is consistent. Now it's a little much more violent in LA, the area that he's in. But this is the kind of neighborhood that would potentially, he would feel comfortable in. He would gravitate to. And this is an on the ground. This is recent video, right?
Yeah.
This is on the ground, giving you a look at, there's a dance or a yoga studio, a couple other things, dance studio, but he's got fuel over here. And this is the apartment complex on the opposite side of the tunnel. Now, tell me about the apartment complex if you know.
I mean, there's not a lot of information I can gauge from just looking at it. There's a lot of variety of vehicles, so I wouldn't, I don't know if it's for 55 plus, but it doesn't appear to be. I don't really know a lot about that apartment. It's, there's not really any advertisement or anything around there, so it's hard to deduce anything from that. But there is a variety of different types of vehicles.
Okay, so now we're going to go on the path. We're going to take the Z to the pedestrian tunnel. So what Gary and I have asked Michael to do is look through the eyes of the offender. So hypothetically, if the offender would have originated on this side, this is the view. So now what I want everybody to do in the chat and stuff, what we're doing tonight is giving you a two-dimensional view. We're giving you the front side and the back side. Which way this guy went, I have no idea.
This is the back of behind the tunnel?
Yeah, this is the other side of the tunnel system.
Fascinating.
But this is Mom Paw Trail right here. So he has access, if he would have originated from this side, to the trail. And so one of the things that I've been having a problem with, just thinking through this, is why would, if he's going to go back out through the front, which is, it's a possibility, no doubt about it. But why is he going, how does he get there? Why is he choosing, how does he get there? Does he come from the front to the front?
Right.
And then conceal himself into the brush? Or does he sneak up from behind? I think this guy's sneaky. And I think this is what's led me to this side of the trail. Mm-hmm. And they're now putting in all of these camera systems on this side of the trail, on the other side of the freeway, as a result of your sister,
What's that old proverb, Chris? Better to learn wisdom late than never at all.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
But Chris, I think we'd agree that if this guy didn't come from that area or spend time there growing up, he certainly spent some days exploring it meticulously. I mean, he's very comfortable and whatever. So so the other, if he isn't from there, and I still cannot understand why a person would randomly pick Bel Air coming from LA if you didn't have a very specific destination. But it does appear that at the very least there would have been a few days of exploring, right? And no one saw him. I mean, not one. I mean, it stands to reason that he just looked nondescript and was sort of strolling around, looking around. But he must have been figuring out.
So hypothetically,
right?
Let's say he's connected somehow to the agricultural aspect on this side of the trail.
Mm-hmm.
Hypothetical. Okay. Well, that gives him all kinds of time to know this side of the trail. Okay. And what you're going to see here, really interesting, is the tunnel system is not very far. In fact, Mike's going to point it out here. This is the second set of tunnels that, you know, if there's the creek right there. There's the culvert. And then you're going to be able to see through the tree line here, the tunnel system. And it's what, how many yards do you think that is, Mike? Guesstimate. You there, Michael? He's frozen. But you can see them right there through the trees?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that is not very far from those apartment complexes and the Z behind those apartment complexes to this trail.
Right.
Okay. So.
Sorry, I think I missed you.
That's all right, bro. How far is that approximate distance? And you can see the back of the apartment complexes right there to that tunnel system. And there's a secondary entrance to the trail from that apartment complex. You're going to see here in a second.
So he's having some kind of router problem or some kind of issue where he's getting intermittent connection.
Okay. Right there is the tunnel system. This is the drainage tunnel. Okay. This is the second drainage tunnel that is on the other side that is in line with the first drainage tunnel where Rachel was killed. And so this is a pedestrian path that is going to connect with the other side. And so I wanted Matt or Michael to take this, walk us through what's going on this side. Again.
You know, he's frozen up, Chris. I mean, we have to give him a minute to come back.
Yeah, he'll have to come back in.
I don't know, Chris. I mean, if I had never been to this area before, I wouldn't be going down there and exploring around and everything. You'd need a comfort with that kind of thing. I mean, I think this guy has worked in rural places.
He's what, Gary?
He's been in rural places. He's comfortable in a rural environment.
Yeah.
Not a city boy like I'm a city mouse. You know, to me, I'd be like, oh God, a tree. You know, but there are some people that would be very comfortable to go down there. I would not.
Yeah. I mean, do you think this is right up his alley in terms of his comfortable zone here?
No, I mean, I just think I somebody who has lived my whole life in a city, I just, you know, this to me is pretty rural. I wouldn't go in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I hope the police have canvassed every single apartment in those apartment complexes up on the hill. I hope they have taken all those flyers and put them in every single one of those facilities over on the other side, and that they've interviewed and pulled staff information on all the employees working on those trucks, the solar installation companies that are over there. So you can see this is a, it's a pretty interesting path. Now this one goes and it turns and then it turns back down and it takes you through the first tunnel. Here comes Mike again. Oh, there you go.
In a lot of trouble, huh?
Yeah.
Much better.
Sorry
Is it like
about
the router or something? It looks like something's making you go in or out, in and out constantly.
I think there's tons of kids like playing games on the.
Oh.
No problem. So, Mike, what walk us through here. You're headed toward the pedestrian tunnel, right?
Yep.
And there's even places where, here there's another entrance right there from the back of that apartment complex. But what's interesting here, this is the Ma and Pa Trail. Now, here's the big question. Did your sister run past this area?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she would run pretty far, so yeah, she would run past there.
Did she ever go to that yoga studio or that gym on the other side?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Maybe Matt will know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That wasn't her gym, so.
I just think he looked at women generally, Chris. It didn't have to be that he was looking at Rachel. I still don't buy that she was stalked. I think that probably he fueled himself up just looking at women.
Yeah.
And being, anything. I mean, a gym, walking on the street, pornography, whatever. But something fueled him up, and then he would pick one who was representative of the whole mess.
Totally agree with you, Doc.
Yeah.
Totally agree. But wouldn't you say that if there was a yoga studio and all this on the other side, and that if he was walking that trail as well, and he was seeing these women coming by, that's going to build his fuel, right?
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, and a sense of resentment and entitlement and everything else. And
okay, and then we get to the first tunnel here, which is a pedestrian tunnel. Remember on the last show, I asked the question: do you think this could have planted the seed? I asked, why did he select a tunnel to pull her into a drainage tunnel?
Right.
I don't know if he had ever walked this path before, if this wasn't part of the inspirational process. If I had this guy in an interview, that'd be one of the first questions I'd ask him. Why the tunnel? What inspired?
But even from, predatory animals, insects, I mean, what they do is when they're in an unfamiliar area, they explore all around until they find a hole or a cavernous area. They sort of thump around with their paws or their mandibles or their claws or whatever they have, and then they insert themselves in it and lay an ambush. I mean, I think it's just an excellent place to have privacy with a victim. And, so that whether the idea was hatched because he found a tunnel and it was opportunistic, or he went looking for one, he certainly set up, like all of these offenders, a place to take the person to play out whatever you were going to do. I mean, I just think it was very pragmatic. I mean, if you think where else, I don't see anywhere else, even remotely near here, that would have made a more ideal cover for that. And then to top the whole thing off, you have a place not far from that tunnel where you can easily lure a victim off a road in an isolated place and do it. So it was like a perfect storm of factors that made it easy. And, and then you add on top of it that, he's got this kind of offense history probably, and he knows he's comfortable with this, and, and he figured time to do my thing. It's hideous.
That's
but
what I love about you, Doc Brucato. That's why I led you right to this point.
Right.
In conversation. Now, this is Michael filming as if he was, through the eyes of the offender, going through the tunnel system. I wanted to see, like you and others, why would this guy turn, or why would he not use this as an advantage? So this is a hypothetical here. This is the way he pulls her into that area.
Now you say pulls, Chris, but that may be an assumption, right? I mean, he could also have used a weapon to, to force her to walk into an area. He could have, we don't exactly know.
The way he kidnaps her.
He certainly moves her to that area. And the other thing that may be something of an assumption is that she wasn't killed outside of the tunnel and then concealed there. In other words, we are presuming that the offense occurs in there for privacy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a higher probability that, right, based on my experience, that if he's going to get into it, he's going to get into it and then pull her into the tunnel.
Well, that would be the most typical thing, but it could also be that the idea was just to conceal afterward. I guess what I'm saying is it makes the most sense that what he did, that he pulled her in and did that there, because that would make him like a lot of other offenders. But technically speaking, we don't have evidence one way or the other. So it's like these are two mysteries, right? How does he get her off the road? Right. And even conscious when she's,
yeah, totally agree.
Right. And, and then the second question being, was there some kind of movement of the body afterward?
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. So I don't know. And also the other thing I wanted to know, I'm still completely confused about is, do we know where her clothes are? Were her clothes recovered?
Michael?
Does Michael know?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
we don't need to know.
Anything that would compromise the right.
You're
well,
fine.
It's an important question, Chris, to be honest with you.
I understand where you're going. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. But think about even like what the psychology would be of taking the clothes with you. I mean, is the idea to humiliate the victim and kind of leave her in a way that, forever the family, and other people have to kind of think of her that way.
You just had that guy in Manhattan that took the girl's pants.
Well,
he wore them out after the murder.
Some of them actually put the clothes on, because they want a change of clothes or whatever. Some of them keep them as trophies. Some of them think they're going to be covered in evidence, so they destroy them. But it's an important question. I mean, were they just tossed to the side? But that's a piece of information that without it really affects our capacity to paint a picture of what exactly was going on here. Certainly, for what he needed to do, he needed nudity. But then what do you do afterwards? I mean, that's the thing. So I guess I just wanted to know if there was any evidence one way or another, if she expired in the same place where the event occurred, or if he sort of staged it up like that a little bit. But
yeah, and if her phone's there,
right,
then that even tells us a little bit more about him in terms of, how quickly this thing could have gone down. But I have a hard time believing that. So this, I'm going to just jump real fast to this. So this is the view going into the tunnel and coming out the other side of the tunnel. Now, I was really fascinated to see what's on the other side of this. I've been waiting for this for 2 weeks, and Michael hit a home run.
Chris, someone in the chat just told us that supposedly her car was found in her phone. Her phone was found in her car.
Okay.
So just FYI, yeah.
Which is kind of weird because wouldn't she run with the phone if she had earpods?
I don't know if that's accurate information. I think she probably.
Okay.
I can't imagine she wouldn't have had it with her. But the person is saying in the chat that her phone was found in her car by police, that she had left it there.
Okay.
I don't know if that's accurate, but I have no idea. Maybe Michael knows.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Mike, do you know where her phone was? Can you say?
I can't say. I don't think I
Okay.
can say, but I mean, I don't think it was in her car.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know why someone in the chat is saying it with confidence.
That's
that it
okay.
was, right. So let's just sort of
So here we are, and this is a very specific area. Extremely.
Very long tunnel, Chris.
Yeah. And it,
That long.
right.
God, it's horrifying, isn't it? It's like kind of.
So here's my question. Gary, tell me what you think. Michael, tell me what you think. He's killed her. Why is he turning and running out the front? Why? You guys in chat, let me hear your answers, because this is part of what we're going, this drill here.
I mean, that video, that's kind of what I was thinking actually right there. You know, before this, I kind of panned both ways. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go this way, away from the scene, you know?
So he's, how far in, like, I think you told me right where where McGregor told me the last time, where the sun kind of, drops in, if I remember right.
Yeah. This is a different time of day. I think this was around 2:00. So it's a little brighter, but right where those lines are, you can see those white lines.
Yeah.
That's,
is that the area?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit one more time for a second. Whoops. I didn't want to go that far. I apologize. So, meaning the suspect, thinking through him, okay, there are people out there. There are people out there. More people. Okay, and you're in this area. Okay. And we look out there. This is his view. Post-homicide. Now, I've talked to many of these guys. Dr. Brucato's talked to thousands of them as well. Why is he choosing to go back that way? Dr. Brucato, any thoughts? Open-ended. Hypothesis only, because this is just our opinion.
You mean to go back out the way that he entered?
Yeah.
Or go back out the other side? Well, you're saying, in other words, if someone were to make the supposition that he came in and went out the same place, what would be the logic, is what you're asking, right? What logic?
Yeah, because I think his risk level goes way up.
Well, let's see. I mean, on the most basic level, he's not very bright, and he didn't really think it through, and he's not really afraid in the way that a more normal person would be. Doesn't really care, couldn't give a flying leap, that kind of thing. The second possibility is that he is so familiar with that area that he doesn't feel that it really poses any kind of threat, or he has some place that he has to head to, that's right near there. I mean, I guess the third possibility is he knows what's in the other direction, and he's not comfortable for some reason with what's back there. But I think that, Chris, that there's no really good practical reason that I can think of why you would do it. I mean, it would require being a little bit foolish or knowing that something in the other direction was a bad idea to flush you out, this way. But yes, it's very risky, very foolish. I mean, you have no idea what people heard, what they saw, what evidence traces there are. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but, unless, well, go ahead, Chris.
So part of his escape plan has to be put into motion now, if he had one, which I would submit.
It's some kind of plan. Right. It wasn't brilliant, but it was some kind of right.
He thought about it. right? Because we have evidence that he thought about the ambush. Enough to the point where he knew where he was going to take her. And he gets her to his location here now. And now he has to say, I got to get out of here. Just like he did, as casual as he did, if we use the model that he used, that he displayed for us, right, Doc, behaviorally?
Right.
In LA. This guy just comes, strolling out of the house there, shirt off, underneath, under his arm, yada, yada. And then he's just off into the neighborhood. Okay. But he exited not the same way he came in.
That's your hypothesis, you're saying?
Well, he came in, he didn't come through the front door in LA. So if past behavior is indicative of future behavior, then I submit at this point, thinking through this, there's a possibility that when he sees that, his risk level goes up, and he sees that. These are great shots, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah.
He sees this, his risk level goes down. And that's why I want to go out this side now.
Michael, how far into the tunnel was she found? Right near the entrance, or in the middle, or what?
I think I measured, or I estimated the tunnel to be approximately 360 or 300. I think about 360 to 370 feet, and I believe it was 35 to 45 feet is the estimate we were given.
That's interesting too, Chris.
Okay.
I mean, don't you think? I mean, if the point is concealment, he didn't go very far into that tunnel.
I agree. Yep. That's a great point, Gary. I mean, and if let's say this guy has some type of cell phone or device on him, that phone can be pinging, right, in this tunnel. And that ping is going to be hitting these triangulation. There's, towers. Remember, these cell towers are 3 sides. Okay. And with a digital, if you have to look at a digital footprint here. Is it possible he comes out of and I've seen cases where they come out one side, but they weren't on the other side. They were, somewhere else. And we see that variance. There are some tools you can use. One of them is a program called Gladiator, where you can go in and you can actually narrow this down. But now you come out, there's only a small amount of water, and you could run along the side of that if you needed to. And now you're out that tunnel.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you can actually walk on the side. I just wanted to walk to show the depth. But yeah, I mean, you can literally walk on the side of the.
And the water level at the time, that's a great question, are not that, Mickey. What was the water level at the time, Michael?
Just be an estimate. I mean, I didn't go back there till I think 2 days after. But we had just had like a huge rainstorm, and it was probably like today. It was probably 4 inches to 6 inches, and when I went there on the, I think it was the 7th or the 8th, it was probably about a foot deep, 11 inches deep. But
but she wasn't found in that much water.
No.
Right?
No.
Right. So during that day, it's probably similar to this. It's
Correct.
It's summertime, this is just runoff, right? Storm drain runoff. Okay. But now this is the other side though, folks. So now you look back, okay? This is his view, and you say, okay, hypothetically, is this an area that he can lower his risk for escape?
Chris, am I correct in envisioning that if he exited through the front and went back into the general population, that he would have had wet shoes, maybe wet pants bottoms, and probably some blood from the bludgeoning on him? I mean, you're talking about somebody that would be rather foolish to kind of walk around. I mean, he would look odd after that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, this offense is in kind of standing water with, you know, and there was bludgeoning involved. I mean, that he wouldn't look exactly the same way he went in.
And that's been my point, right, Gary? I mean, the whole thought process is, wait a minute, this guy has just committed first-degree murder, you know, an SA, and, you know, goodness knows we don't need to know the result or the manner at this point. But now he says to himself, okay, I've taken all my time to plan this whole thing, okay? And now I've got all this other potential evidence on me. You know what? I'll just walk out on the path and walk away as if nobody saw me. I'm just, you know, Casper the Friendly Ghost. Nobody's going to see me walking right out onto the path coming from the tunnel where I just left this victim. But this way, if he went this way, now his risk level goes way down because he can make him, if hypothetically,
Right.
I'm not saying this is the way. Now, here's an interesting thing here. If he hypothetically had come out of this way, his phone is pinging in a it's pinging on the same towers as if he's in the front or if he's in the back. It doesn't matter. His pings are going to show that he's in that area. Okay. Now, there are ways to narrow that down, but it's not a specific science. Okay. It's not a grappling science where they say, yes, this is the exact spot. Okay. Now, you can do that, but you need some extra tools to do that. So if he's out front, for him to have gone out front and that risk level way up there, that I agree with you, Gary. That just goes more towards the hypothesis. This guy is not the sharpest tool in the shed.
No, I believe so. But
right?
He's very visual. He's strong. You know, he's had some experience in open areas, wilderness, and he's not afraid. You know,
And this
that's
is a little fun.
he's
Go
not
ahead.
motivated by self-preservation in the way that somebody who was a little bit more of a scaredy cat would be. He's not afraid like that.
Yep. And you can see the compression here on the ground. It looks like folks are familiar with this area and they go through this area here. And now are those the other set of tunnels right there, right, Mike?
I don't think you can quite see them from here.
Okay.
But I wanted to make a quick note.
Please.
These tunnels are, thick corrugated metal, pipes, and your cell service doesn't work very well in there. And like I tried to fly a drone in there, but it didn't work. So
Okay.
that's just something to note.
No, that's important because when you come out, you're right. That would make sense because now once he steps out on either side, you're going to get a tower ping.
I mean, assuming he has a phone, Chris.
Yeah, that's an assumption, of course. I'm going to be surprised, though, if he's traveling across the country that he doesn't have a digital footprint. Well, and what's fascinating here is, so this is, you can come out those tubes and you can make your way to the other set that brings you back out onto the Ma and Pa Trail.
Yeah, and I was just walking, kind of slow, like casually. So it's actually not as far as it seems.
Now, if you're running through this and the trees are in full bloom at that time, nobody's going to see you.
Yeah, and there's a game trail there. Actually, it's more defined in the summer. But the same path I'm walking right now. So,
What's up there?
that's a highway, but I pointed just because there was a lot. It looked like more than game tracks. It looked like people actually were going up and down that area right there.
Chris, are we confident he didn't get to the highway? to walk along or anything like that? I mean, usually there are witnesses when that happens, right?
Yeah, I don't think he.
On the side of the road, walking,
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, trying to think through what's his risk level. Where's he at now post homicide? I mean, help us understand these guys, Gary, in terms of Dr. Brucato, where, help the audience understand. He's just gone through this whole thing. He's still way up here, right?
Yeah, he's probably flooded with adrenaline and kind of exhilarated, not afraid in the way that most of us would be, and I think the average person would be, but more kind of exhilarated, pumped up, and that kind of thing. And I don't think he's making decisions based on a normal degree of worry, because he's probably a psychopath. So
Okay.
he's just making decisions based on how do I quickly get out of here, and that kind of thing. So, but I don't know. I'm just trying to gauge if he's walked this path before and knows exactly where he's heading, or if he's wandering and just gets lucky, that kind of thing. But I still think he knew this place. I mean, he's comfortable.
Yep.
I mean, Chris, that's your sense, right? Yeah.
And so this is the other set of tunnels now he would come to if he had come out the back, hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's same environment, same setup.
Dogs didn't smell anything of somebody having been there or anything?
Did they have scent dogs?
They had scent dogs. I'm not sure. Yeah, they didn't pick up any.
Well, that's because of the water.
Water, right. He was probably walked in the water, left no tracks or anything. I mean, I would if I had done something like this. I mean, but I don't know.
I had a tracking dog. His name was Irk. I was a canine handler for 3 years.
Wow.
And if a suspect runs through water or is in that water, you're not going to find him.
Right. I'm saying if he's clever, that's what he would have done. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're coming out the other side. Everybody watch this. This is interesting. Michael, thank you so much for doing it.
Pretty great.
So now he's out the other side.
Oh, look at that.
And he can pause, hypothetically. He can wait. He can hide. He can wait till nothing is out there in front of him. And at some point, he can make some more decisions. And there's the apartment complex.
So in theory, a person could kind of take a very long way around.
Correct.
Right. So I mean, if you followed this trail around, you'd eventually come back to the front where the tunnel is.
Yeah. If you started at that apartment complex, right, or the one with the right we were talking about from the other side, Gary, when we were kind of processing this together.
Yeah.
He could just step off the Mom Paw Trail, go right through both of those tunnels, and he's at the crime scene.
So he probably, it's interesting. He probably, I mean, if he did go through, like you're suggesting,
here you are.
We're simply take the long road back to the front, whatever the anchor point is in the front. It's just that for concealment, instead of just going right back through the tunnel, you take this long path and come back to whatever home base is, right? I mean, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, or he comes back now to an area of escape, i.e., so like these two people here now on the Mom Paw Trail, let's hypothesize this is one of our guys. He comes down. At the time, green is everywhere. You can't see anything. The moment he enters that woods, those forests, and it's going to be really hard to see this guy. So everything is to his advantage, right? He makes it through the first set of tunnels, makes it through the second set of tunnels, and this now, he is in the exact spot where that bend comes around and he selects Rachel. So it's a straight line almost. I mean, there's some curvature, obviously, for him to manipulate around the pond and all that stuff. But But Michael just did it in less than 15 minutes, less than 10 minutes on video.
Yeah, I'd say, I was really taking my time, but it's definitely shorter just, to walk through both the tunnels. I mean, it cuts down the time, I don't know, a lot. Like,
okay. So now he pops back up on the trail looking both ways.
All right.
And he's walking away. Nobody's gonna see any of the problems potentially. Okay. I.e., if there was, stuff left on him. And he could make it, if he wanted to, like Michael's showing us here, straight up into the apartment complex or into this area. Or he could go back up that trail, which Michael showed us him walking down to the pedestrian. And now he is, if he took that route, up to the backside of this apartment complex here.
But Chris, I want to make sure I'm following. Your hypothesis is that his home base, wherever he is on, is on the side of the tunnel where she's found, where she's closer to the mouth of the tunnel there. He then goes through the tunnel, walks through this wilderness area, and basically loops back the long way to whatever that home base area is that is in the front of the tunnel. Is that what you're suggesting? That in other words, that he comes from and goes to some place that is on that side? Or are you suggesting that there's something on the other side of the tunnel where he can hang out a while?
Well, my hypothesis right now, thinking out loud,
sketching this out loud. So I'm just thinking, is
this area on this side of the tunnels, not the side where she parked her car?
That's what I'm asking. Is that more his home base, or are you saying that home base is the other side and he has to loop back around the long way to get back there?
I don't think. I mean, it's a possibility, of course. Okay, but I'm going to give it a 60-40. 40% that he's on the side where her car is. 60% that he's on this side, and the reason for that, in my thought process right now, is, and I'll entertain either one of them, and the footprint data.
I think we have to be agnostic. Yeah.
Right, agnostic. The digital data can help even narrow this scope down a little bit further, but it still does not eliminate the point of entry for this guy. I don't see this guy originating the same side where Rachel pulls up and parks her car. If he does, he comes from this angle through that pedestrian bridge side, which Michael showed us a little while ago, which ends up, connecting to that bend. But this way, it's almost like a straight arrow right to the crime scene. And now he can also thought process, right, Gary? He's in that tunnel. He can say, okay, this is where I got to get her right here. I got to get her back to this spot. And then he goes out and, like the dirtbag that he is, he hunts her, or anybody at that point. It would have been anybody too, Michael, by the way. Okay. And he goes on the hunt, but he's established his den in that tunnel where the deeds are going to take place. And then I think this is a much more comfortable escape route for him than running out into the public, where he risked think about this. There is one witness that they found that said, yeah, there was a guy hanging out here, okay, like weeks before Rachel's crime. So that means people were vigilant in thought process. After her death, I've seen community, vigilant, the community tempo of the thought of going, you know what? I remember seeing something, some dude, or, just didn't look right. DLR, right? Doesn't look right. But in this escape route, to answer your question, I think he's on this side. I think he's more comfortable on this side, where the apartment complexes are, and where the industrial area is, where the yoga studio is, where that little workout place is. I could be 1,000% wrong, and I'm okay with that.
But Chris, based on his behavior in LA, I mean, just think about how boneheaded and impulsive that whole thing was. I mean, he leaves his hat. I think he even left like some alcohol that like.
Yeah, but I think the hat was part of the fight.
I understand, but he left it. I mean, in other words, I mean, you'd be petrified if you knew anything about DNA. You'd know how stupid it was to let that happen. You know, he doesn't realize there's going to be a whole clan of people in there. You know, he obviously didn't go in there like armed or anything, because a kid was able to toss him out. You know, he lets himself be filmed on the camera, shirtless, and kind of walk out. I mean, this is not Einstein. We're talking about I mean, an impulsive kind of dimwit. But I agree with you, Chris, that he's not stupid enough to walk right into a crowded place. He may have learned from the first offense a little bit.
Or does he know? I mean, it's not revealed yet, but Gary, it will not shock me if he knew those people. I've had so many cases involving illegal immigrants when at work in Southern California. I mean, the world's just starting to see it now, but I started this in 82, we were dealing with it. And trying to get those folks sometimes, because they're so scared of the authorities, trying to get them to tell you, hey, was that your cousin? Okay. And you and I are working on that, that other situation with El Torito, where I had to convince the family that we were going to turn the federales on people. Mm. And so it won't surprise me if there wasn't, let's say, a neighborhood announcement of a quinceañera or, some type of party at the house or whatever. And then this guy somehow, moseys his way into the house. And then when he's in there, the blitz attack takes place. Maybe the party's on its way down and he's kicked out of the house. Evident the fact that the kid, the younger boy pushes him out of the house. Get out of here, Jose. Go home. You're drunk. Okay. And they push him out and he's like, yeah, okay, sorry. And he walks out as casual as can be. But look at this area right here that comes right up to that trail. If there's a digital footprint, if he has a phone, they've got those pings. But then they have to know who he is then, if they have a digital footprint. And I don't think they know who he is. So they have a footprint of phones within the area. And right there, I mean, there's a salon, there's a studio, all of this stuff. I don't know. Do we know if those are, any of that is HUD stuff? Michael, do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Thoughts, ideas, and everybody, this is the flyer. This is the guy. And of course, we've seen the Bulls hat, Chicago Bulls hat. That he left at the scene, to Dr. Brucato's point, and the alcohol. We know there was alcohol in there. I have a hard time processing that the guy brought his own beer to the party. Meaning he's going to go in there and sexually assault somebody and might as well bring my beer with me, to your point, Gary. And I don't know if it's a beer or if it's a liquor.
I do suspect that alcohol was part of the fuel.
I agree.
And that's another thing that would add to, how conspicuous he would be. I mean, you have to picture a person that's possibly got some alcohol in him. He's pumped up. He's probably got some blood on him. He's got water all over the place. I mean, he was in standing water. We have no idea if he was down in the water at all. He's got probably dirt on him. I mean, this is this guy is conspicuous. That's the whole thing. So I'm interested in that. I mean, if he was organized enough to want to conceal himself in a tunnel, he's going to be organized enough to not want to be seen when the deed is over, right? So we have to picture the state that he would have been in. And, that's important, I think, to get a sense of how conspicuous. If he encountered anybody, I mean, wouldn't they remember him? I mean, this guy doesn't exactly blend.
Yeah.
So, and does he have his clothes on? I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I want to know. I mean, we just don't know. Are her clothes in his hand? Did he dump them somewhere? We have no idea. Would he have been aggressive toward anybody who he encountered? Because, or would he have just looked kind of calm? I have no idea. But when my imagination is kind of going in circles because we don't have enough data, right? I can actually see both scenarios. That he stupidly goes out the front and he goes out I know what it would be wiser to do, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, his behavior at the first incident is so ridiculous that it's like all bets are off. He clearly doesn't think like a chess player. If he were a chess player, he's the kind of person who would put the queen, diagonal from a pawn, and you'd be like, have you ever played this game before? He's not a bright guy. So that's what I'm struggling with is that I just think that we have to dumb down our thinking to continue.
Okay. We'll stay on that tempo for a minute. Mike, I know you have to go. I'm going to let you bounce out of here. And Gary and I are going to continue on here because we've got a ton of questions that they're mostly directed at the doc. So
you want to give people a chance to ask Michael anything that they may want to ask?
Well, Michael, can you hang on for that?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to
see you, Mike. I'm glad that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so let's go here. Okay, that one was already answered. Do we know the water level from not that Mickey? The sound of the water might also be why he chose how he did it. It could have muffled the sound. Okay, so these are from New Zealand, by the way. Thank you so much, Not So Mickey. That's awesome. Okay, here's one. Is there any path away from the scene right outside the tunnel?
Which side do they mean?
Great question. Maybe both sides. Let's just think of both sides. From the front side, is there a path out?
I mean, the quickest way would be straight forward into the woods, and then it would lead up to Leodendron. It's an old mansion. And there's a big parking lot there. On the other side, I mean, you have access anywhere when you come out the other side of that tunnel. But everywhere you pop out is going to be highway unless you go through the other set of culverts.
So as the acoustics been checked, you would think somebody screaming would have been deafening. Do we know if they... Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty quiet, actually. A couple days after my sister, with all the foliage and everything. So, I don't think, if people are walking with headphones and, I don't think it would definitely muffle the sound, all the trees, foliage.
Is it possible he started knowing the area by initially coming here to get away, use substances at the time that built up knowledge until the opportunity arises? Doc, you don't see these guys processing like that, right?
I mean, it's plausible that, he randomly descends somewhere, scopes out, builds a nest up, fuels himself, but it's so random. It's so specific. I mean, it would be like let's say one day, you turn to your partner, you said, let's go on a trip somewhere. Where would you like to go? Let's go to Bel Air, Maryland. Like, it's so random that it boggles the mind to think that somebody would go there unless there was a very specific reason to go there. I mean, I don't know, maybe, I could see the TIR being in Baltimore as a major city, but I don't know. It's odd to me. The whole thing is odd. I think it's more that there's some familiarity with that place, some tie to it that will all emerge one day, whether it's work related or family related or whatever. And he basically gets himself there, after the first offense to hide out and is so impulsive that he can't control the appetite. That has to happen even in the hiding place, that kind of thing. But Chris, doesn't he also act to you like a person that has had some experience with homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, he could have, again, he could have been a traveler, right, from South America or
A lot of that behavior, that comfort with the wilderness, the being in tunnels, God knows where he was sleeping, what he was eating. I'm just saying that there's also a distinct possibility that this guy is, somebody who's been in a shelter system or whatever. But he seems to me very transient, and I think that the transience is going to turn out to be pretty key to his capture. Because the whole point is, like, the reason we can't figure out home base is there probably isn't one. He's just familiar with a bunch of different places. But he does seem to me to, at least at some points, just robbed and done whatever he needed to do to get his needs met. And he's sort of like the equivalent, like the human equivalent of like that sucker fish in the fish tank that basically just lives off of scraps, like a totally predatory animal thing that is just sheer survival. And he just feels entitled to do whatever he's got to do. Like, if you present yourself and it's opportunistic, he takes advantage, and that's it. And I just think that's how you have to picture him, like sheer appetite, just at all times doing whatever he's got to do to survive. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if, he even was sleeping out in the open. I wouldn't be shocked at all. And you know what I'm saying?
He's had experience with that. Yeah, for sure.
I suspect he has had some experience with that. Yes.
Yeah. And Michael, I know you have to jump because you sent me a text here. So we're going to excuse you. We really appreciate you being here. And I will call you at the end of the program here and just give you, a sincere thank you for the footage that you have here. And
that would be great. Yeah.
We'll chase it down. We'll follow it up here. Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Gary.
All right.
You're welcome. Keep up the fight.
Thank you for being here. Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay. So there's a couple more questions, Gary, but they weren't connected to Michael.
I think that was really, really useful.
Oh my God.
That brought the entire thing to life. And it keeps bringing me back to your point about the Kohlberger. Like, imagine, when they capture this guy and you've got a jury and you're trying to make them understand how calculated, how cruel, how etc. Having this imagery brings it to life. I mean, I was imagining myself as the victim in that tunnel, and you really understand how horrifying this was, and how, perverse and how violent, and how, you just can picture it. And then what I realized today for the first time is whatever hideousness was going on in that tunnel, it was literally in standing water. Like, it's hideous. The whole thing is so disgusting. And you have to picture that, just suddenly, like, it all starts to, I'm too imaginative, that's how I do my work, and I'm just picturing from the perspective of the victim, and it's very painful.
It's very painful. I mean, right. I mean, this is why we do what we do, to get all the dimensions of what's taking place at that scene. This is the one thing that, remember, I shared Jigsaw. He told me, take a chair, sit in that room, stare at that wall, and do a 360. This is why I needed to see what's on the other side of that tunnel. I can't tell you how many times I thought it was a certain way. And then you get the suspect in the room and he goes, what are you talking about? And you've interviewed the hundreds of these guys, thousands of these guys. They're all in your book here, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's never appears the way it is, or it never seems to be the way it ends up being. What's fascinating for me, and to your point that you just made a second ago, I didn't even think through that process of, holy cow, there is standing water in there. So to me, that tells me, on this other piece of this guy is not afraid to get dirty, to get down with it. And so that means there's a level of confidence there, or okay, whatever, I get wet, I get what I want. And that even helps me, or it leans me even further now to the back. because I don't think he's dumb enough, unless he is just a bag of rocks of some sort, where he just comes out back through the front, maybe with transfer, with maybe water all over him, and then he's going to somehow make it back up onto the trail and nobody's going to see him. He's just going to merge away.
Yeah,
With all-
and he would have been pretty filthy, Chris. I mean, I think we really have to put ourselves in. You're talking about water, dirt, mud, blood, being a little, maybe marks on you if she put a fight up, leaves, grass, etc. It's hard to imagine him thinking it made sense to stroll out among people. But who knows? I mean, I just think the jury is out. I mean, because the problem I keep having is I can't put myself into the impulse and intellect level of the person, of him, because we don't really know it. But if what happened in LA is any clue, I mean, he's not the most organized fellow, so it's hard. And it's also hard to tell if he was intoxicated. That's the other piece of it. It's hard to tell if he was intoxicated. I really want to know where her clothes are. I really want to know if any fantasy was enacted beyond just assault and then elimination of the victim. I really want to know if there was any humiliation or posing or anything like that. I want to know if he took pictures on the cell phone, if there even was a cell phone. I want to know if he, was saying things to her or screaming at her, or I want to know all this stuff, because it'll make us understand what's really fueling this. But unfortunately, we're totally in the dark, and I mean, Chris, the thing that I think we have to keep hitting on over and over and over again is this guy does not behave like a garden variety person who commits sexual assault. He behaves like a serial killer. And I think that the fact that we haven't seen an offense since is very interesting. I think that, to me, I mean, every day that ticks on, there isn't an offense, it gets more and more peculiar, right? Where is he? Is he incarcerated on some other offense, which was non-sexual, and they haven't put, his DNA into CODIS? Is it possible he slipped out of the country? Is it possible that he suddenly has impulse control and is hiding out? Is it, although that's not characteristic of this guy, clearly, is it possible that he's, committed suicide, that he's dead? Is it possible? Who knows? But it is very odd that nothing has happened since, what is it, August?
Yeah, it's been a while.
That's a little strange, because he behaves like a serial killer, but is not doing anything else. The other possibility is that he's committed an offense that is so fantastically concealed as one of his offenses that we don't realize that he acted out. And because we're looking for something that's going to look an awful lot like his prior activity. I think we have no idea. All I know is there's something very, very strange about the lapse. So you're talking about August would take us. That's a lot of months, Chris. That's like half a year at this point. We're now at the point of it almost being a year since the home invasion. There isn't that much time between the home invasion and the and all. Well, is there? Let's see. March to, well, okay, he holds it about 5 months between the two offenses the first time. So if we sort of sequence it, I mean, chances are, if that's his interval, 5-6 months, then maybe something will occur around now. But it's just hard to tell. We also don't know, because offenders are very, very different in the in that camel-like process of how long they can go after they've feasted, after they've committed their offense. How long can they go, before they need another one? And
is there a duration? Is there a duration, Gary? I mean, what's it? Is there?
This is something that I've actually suggested to people needs to be studied. Is the average duration of cooling off period between offenses, because the way that I think when I do research is I envision myself in a courtroom or in an interview or something, and somebody asks me a question that I cannot answer. If I can't answer it, I want to research it. And if somebody said to me right now, what is the average duration of a cooling off period for an offender? I don't think anyone really knows. I certainly don't have a confident answer to that. I've seen everything from, a week you know, where you're not a spree killer, right? You're a serial killer. I've seen everything from like, you know, a week to a month to years, right? Years and years. There have even been offenders that have gone dormant for a decade or more, right? It's very unusual, very rare. But so that's the thing. It's the most likely thing, if he's like most offenders, is that he has done something to fuel himself, but we just don't know what it is because it's not being tied genetically. You know, lewd, you know, activities, looking at pornography, some other kind of thing. But he's doing something to fuel it because that personality is kind of always there. I just don't know where he is, and I don't know if this is if there's any signature element that's going to be consistent. So far, I don't see a signature. It just looks like he attacks anything female, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any one female he attacks. So don't you think, Chris, he's totally opportunistic?
Yeah. But you don't sense that there's not, he's going to hit again, right?
It's almost impossible to, unless he's dead or incarcerated or left the country somewhere out there, you know, he is, it will happen again because he ultimately has a need, an animalistic kind of need to do this. And, you know, I don't know how he fuels it. Some of these guys find ways to get it out of their system, you know, one way or another. But what was the comment that was just?
He just said, "I always have." Thank you, Dr. B. I always have plenty of questions. That's only because you challenge my thinking. So I put never apologize. Not that, Mickey. Trust me, right. Dr. Brucato and I, we just go like this for hours. Even when we're not here. And when I say something dumb, he never says anything. And when I hear something, I go, okay, well, I'm not thinking like that. So never apologize. This is why we love you guys being here, to think outside the box. Yeah. To think our responsibility is not to solve this problem, this crime. That's right. Up to the authorities. They're doing a great job doing that. Our responsibility is to help support the family. And I think, you know, one of the takeaways of this for us tonight is we hope they go over on that side if they haven't already, which I'm going to be surprised they haven't. But I'm hoping that they have, and that they absolutely canvass that entire area over there. They canvass. I think your camera lens, Gary.
I think it's the light behind me. So let me just.
All right. No, I think it's a smudge on your camera.
Okay.
And so while you're doing that, I'm going to answer this. Could have been a scoping, playing an ambush from a close apartment, middle of the day ambush, vet girl. You know, that's a great question. As Dr. Brucato has mentioned, this guy is planning. There's no question. Go into a little bit more about the planning process for these guys, Gary, when you analyze them.
Well, it's very complicated because you have to ask yourself, what are the common denominators between these offenders? Well, the common denominator is, first of all, you have to have a certain brain at baseline, the certain type of mind where you're fearless, you're sensation-seeking, impulsive, etc. Right? I think at baseline, the psychopathic person has a certain type of brain. And then what you need is some circumstance that pushes that brain toward antisocial behavior. So you've been hurt in some way, right? You either have to fend for yourself, you come from unpredictable love objects, no one's ever cared about you, you were bullied, you were sexually, there was SA, you were physically assaulted, you were bullied, whatever. Something happens to you that gives you a sense of anger, entitlement, etc. The other common denominator is that usually around adolescence, they start fusing sexuality with aggression, particularly towards women or whoever it is they want to level the playing field against. And then they start to create these fantasies. And those fantasies, they gestate, they germinate for a little while, and they fuel them with pornography, more subtle crimes, etc. And then what happens is there's that day when the plan gets enacted. It all gets brought together. The opportunity is there, the nerve, perhaps there's alcohol or drugs in the mix. A victim has presented herself or in front of you, whatever. And now, boom, everything gets enacted, right? And because you fantasized about it for a long time, you've thought to yourself, if I were going to do that, I'd have to do it in some kind of private place. If I were going to do that, I would make the victim do this or do that. oh, I would bring something with me to lure the person. So it's very premeditated. And then what happens is with each offense, as you kind of perfect this over and over again, you learn from experience, like how to not leave traces, how, you sort of seem to be getting away with it because even though you left some evidence, they're not coming and knocking on your door. You get more arrogant and audacious because you think you're getting away with it. And I just think what you want to picture is a person who at this point, there's nothing to make him learn his lesson yet, right? Like he hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been caught. The guy was caught on camera and he's still strolling around out there. It must be giving him a sense of entitlement. Like, nah, you got me on camera and I'm still doing this, right? And I think what you want to picture is a person who has had this fantasy for so long that it's just a matter of when he enacts it again. And I think, Chris, the only explanations for why he's not doing it anymore is either where he's located, the opportunity not presenting itself, fear, incarceration, or death. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's one of those things. And the most likely explanation, I mean, look, I know you, Chris, if I would guess that you wonder if he's gone over the border.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a distinct possibility. He gets himself back to LA, he slips home, and that's the end of it, right?
Yeah,
That's entirely possible.
Right. And Kate's question about what kind of employment, could he be a truck driver?
I wondered that all along. I remember the very first episode we ever did with your friend, the investigator. What was his name? The one who writes the books about teddy bears.
Oh, John Lamb.
John Lamb. That's it. I remember that at the end of that, we all wondered if he was a
and
trucker.
and we had a caper. He was the case agent on a similar situation where, I mean, it was almost, except for the tunnel, but it was a carbon copy in a park, and it was a horrific crime. And that guy, that guy reminds me of this guy. Obviously, our guy is in custody, but they'll catch this guy, but it's going to be in CODIS or something to that effect. So
yes. And you know what else horrifies me about him, Chris, is that based on the LA incident, I also think he would attack a kid. I mean, that's the other thing. This is not someone who is necessarily, stopping a female and going, "Can I see your ID?" I want to know how old you are. I think to him, a female is a female, and he couldn't care less. How old they are. I just think he's totally opportunistic and hates the entire sex. So that I think, unfortunately, children are also on the table as an option for him. Yeah. You definitely want to think about that. My guess is the most logical conclusion, I think, is that there have been other offenses, but they haven't been linked to him yet. I agree. It's just a long period of time without anything. He's too impulsive. He must be fueling it somehow. And one day, when he's captured, all the strings will, the yarn strings will pull us back to the center of the web, and we'll discover that he's been pretty prolific. Because Chris, this guy is in his early to mid 20s. So he's probably had a career of at least a few years of some offenses. I would guess breaking and entering, robbing. He's certainly supporting himself some way. He's probably had some fights, that he's gotten in trouble for because he's angry and kind of impulsive. And I think some lewd behavior. This is the kind of guy that gets in trouble for things like, knocking a female down and trying to attack her on the street, calling out inappropriately to a woman, exposing himself, things like that. And wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, and also I don't see him in an authoritarian wearing a uniform or using that type of roost. Do you? I mean, Shannon.
But you see this point Lori's making? If he was arrested for a non-sexual offense, because I think this question comes up in the general public a lot. Okay. Do you want to talk, Chris, about whether you would take DNA for a non-sexual offense from an offender?
Well, as crazy as that sounds, it's really up to the jurisdiction when they come through the door at a jail. If it's a drunken public or something to that effect, they're not going to put a buccal swab on you and take your DNA. If they believe
That's
you,
what I think.
Yeah, well, they won't do it because you need a search warrant.
And my concern is that there have been other things that if they come out it'll be a very obvious and typical trajectory to this. I mean, this is not this guy's first rodeo.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he's done it, but he has done things before. I don't know if he's killed anyone, but he's certainly been sexually perverse, aggressive, entitled, and he's a crook. I mean, that's the other thing. This guy is a parasite that lives off of other people's stuff and money, etc. That's why I keep coming back to Richard Ramirez. Think of Richard Ramirez as the prototype, right? The family is Mexican. He has a father that's never around. He's got a mother that's limited, in being able to handle him. He basically feels entitled to go around taking whatever he wants. He starts out breaking and entering. He graduates, into committing sexual offenses against sleeping people. He gets increasingly violent and risky. And ultimately, he gets caught because he thinks, he's invisible. He's very arrogant. And eventually the public spots him, and that's the end of him. But I think that he is, whenever I think about an offender, I always think like, what serial offender is like the prototype for him, right? And to me, he feels Ramirez like in that way, in terms of his psychology. Now,
right. Finish your thought.
I'm just saying, like, and I think with Ramirez, everything was opportunistic. In the course of robbery and basically feeling entitled to take care of himself, he just starts, getting into SA and physical assault and gets a little sadistic, and he uses whatever is around. In one instance, he killed a woman with a coffee table because there was a coffee table there, it's that kind of thing. He'll just do whatever is around him. And if there are kids there, he assaults kids. If there's an adult, he assaults an adult. If it's a male, he assaults the male. I just kind of think that's what you've got to picture is he's a little different than a Ted Bundy. He's not as sophisticated. He doesn't have a very clear prototype of the kind of victim he wants. There's no talking component. It's robbery, living. I mean, this is the kind of guy that would, like, if he broke in your house and killed you, he would like kick his feet up and eat what was in the refrigerator, that kind of thing, and then leave, that kind of thing. It's funny, Chris. I studied, I'm always studying commonalities between offenders because it fascinates me. And I found when I was doing the scale, building up the scale with Michael, is that offenders that tended to do that. Yeah, right.
You guys, if you don't have this book, go. Well, they're going to ask, though. The questions are going to come here in a second. What's his number?
All right. Well, I think he's a 17, but we found that offenders who broke into houses and kind of helped themselves to what was in it, like the Manson family did and things like that, they tend to be spree killers. They don't tend to be people with long cooling off periods. They tend to be people who are constantly doing it, and they get desensitized, to the fact that you could get busted for doing it. It's interesting. By the way, that cover that you were pointing to, I'll tell you an interesting anecdote about that. When the book came out, I did a contest on Instagram to see who could name the skeleton on the front cover. And no one came up with anything particularly interesting. And then one day the book was sitting out, and my nephew, who at the time was, I guess, a little boy, maybe about 4 or 5 years old, he looked at the cover and he said, he called it Trixie. And I said, well, why do you call this face Trixie? And he said, because he looks nice, but he tricks you. Well, and I thought, what a clever kid. So now I call that face Trixie. Ever since my nephew gave her that name. So anyway, I thought that was interesting.
So 2 questions. One, do you think he's capable of hurting anybody? And okay, so that answers that. And this is, so you say he's a 17. So if you have the book at home, everybody, jump into chapter 17 and pull it out, because then you're going to know what this guy's about going through. Okay, so now that we've had a different dimension here, I mean, right, in your mind, when you put yourself back into that tunnel like we did tonight, and we see this direction and that direction, you would agree, right? I mean, we can both agree that it's a possibility he could go back out to the front. I mean, that's always a possibility.
Yeah, he can go either way. I just think it depends on his intelligence and his impulsivity and his insight, and where home base is, if there even is one.
Do you think he's checking the media?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, if he has a phone or a means to do so, he'd be foolish not to. But you know, he could be watching right now. I mean, there are certainly offenders, Chris, that I think watch your program when we talk about them. That is something I think we just have to assume. But yes, Vet Girl, you are correct. I do think he's 17. Listen, the good thing about that, I think that he's a 17 is that implies no, Sherry, no. Koberger, if guilty, is a 16. The reason I think that that's important, being a 17, is that implies there's no torture. There's no protraction of the offense. And remember, in my own study, in my own work, I found that torturing a victim is correlated with higher IQ. This is not a very bright person, and I hate to say that there's a relationship between IQ and torture, but there is, because for these offenders, it's really about intellectual stimulation and fantasy. So it shouldn't be surprising that the ones with higher IQs engage in more of that rich enactment of fantasy. I think everything about it suggests this guy is pretty average in his intellect. Does it bother him that you call him unintelligent? I don't know. Frankly, I'm sorry if it does, but I don't think you're getting into Mensa anytime soon. Chris, it reminds me of the old joke that two people are having a conversation about wanting to get into Mensa, and one of them says, "Oh, in the town I came from, there was a Mensa. It was the wait, what was the joke? It's what it said on the door of the men's room in the only Italian restaurant in the town. It was men, right? No, exactly right. So but anyway, but I think not a brilliant guy, and that has to be our starting point in that kind of Sherlockian way. You imagine yourself into the scene, and think like a person who isn't particularly clever. For example, with most offenders, like in Koberger, if Koberger's guilty, there's no question Koberger studied the living crap out of true crime, right? I still think you read my book for many reasons. I think that, but he learned tricks.
That won't surprise you if it comes out.
Not at all. And there's a few reasons I won't be surprised about it.
Okay.
I mean, don't forget, Chris, my very dear friend Catherine Ramsland, who taught Koberger, reviewed the book and wrote about it multiple times on the internet, and the class might have known.
Yeah.
No, I would not be surprised at all, especially because there are an awful lot of places in that book he could have learned a lot of the things that he did. But he certainly read books like that if he did it. But this offender, the Rachel Morin offender, this guy is not steeped in knowledge from previous offenders. I mean, this guy is not a mastermind that looked up other cases and learned from them. This is much lower on the in the kind of intellect scale. This guy's not in a PhD program or something. You know what I mean? I think could it go lower? You're afraid of your personal safety. Well, I mean, what are we supposed to do? Walk around with a pit helmet on, or something? I mean, at this point,
that's a sincere question, right? Where Garrett, Doctor, he has to worry more than me, because I can CCW, because I'm retired.
You ever really feel afraid?
I always have the credit card with me. It's always, sitting on my hip. But I don't know about you. But
it comes with the territory that But
yeah,
there is no question that we've both gotten disturbing messages, threats,
sure,
things like that. But I mean, here I am. Here you are, right? I mean,
I think the most nervous I've ever been was I was working some things, a gang caper, and I went into the neighborhood where this thing was going down, and they had my name spray painted on the wall. It said, McDonough 187, and I thought, that's not good. And so I got a call, from the chief. He said, you need to come in and talk to me and blah, blah, blah. He says, you're taking a vacation. You're out of here for a couple of weeks. And they sent me on a 2-week hiatus, to get out of there because, I basically had a problem. But, and to be honest with you, I never went into that neighborhood without my credit card. That's what I call him. Never leave home without it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, the fact of the matter is we get threatening messages and things, but they're not, how do I say this? In my experience, a person who's actually going to come and do something with you isn't going to call you up, something to you is not going to call you up and threaten you in advance. I mean, they're just going to pop up out of nowhere and do what they're going to do, and, it is what it is. Maybe I won't die in my bed. What can I tell you? But I still feel inclined to do what I do.
You are fine. Just the fact that Herman dropped his pizza just outside of your office. That's. Remember, you called me that day. I mean, when Gary and I
had garbage in the same pail.
Is Rex? He was right outside of Dr. Brucato's office. That's where that pizza was found. And we had a conversation. I was like, you know what, that dude could have known, where you were. I don't know, but you just don't know. That guy's an interesting situation, but that's for another show. Hey, speaking of other shows, next week we have Dr. Ramsland and Tracy Ullman coming on with Dr. Brucato and I to talk about her new book, The Serial Killer's Apprentice. This is another fascinating read. And this one is scary. This one's
am I allowed to tell people what it's about?
Yes, please. Give them the Reader's Digest.
I thought that book was fantastic. So anyone who is interested in the most outrageous cases, right, the most horrible, the 22s, right, you'd be familiar with Dean Corll. Dean Corll, who they called the Candyman, right, was one of the most horrendous sexual torturers of children who ever lived, and very prolific serial killer and torturer. And to date, the most, I think, critical book on him was a book called The Candyman. Now, that book, compared to this one, is I mean, it's just completely eclipsed. What this book is about is really about the use of an apprentice who gets involved in the case, Henley, who gets involved in assisting this offender, and then ultimately kills him, ultimately eliminates him himself, and then starts to tell the story of everything that had happened. But when I tell you that Dean Corll was one of the worst of the worst of the worst, I mean, it's like you almost need a 23, like, talk about him. And then you take that story and you filter it through a mind like Dr. Ramsland's, which is, she thinks like a mystery writer or a novel writer. I mean, her anything is golden when it's, written by Dr. Ramsland. And I just think her writing and then, the storyline makes for extremely amazing reading. I mean, you can't put that book down, as disturbing as it is. And I have to tell you, like, it's going to be a true crime classic. Right now, if you were to say, like, does Dr. Ramsland have a book that, like, there is no true crime library that doesn't have it? Yeah, probably, her book on BTK, I think, is certainly an example of that, right? This is now going to be one of those true crime classics. I'm proud to say I think The New Evil is on a lot of people's shelves in that way, but there are certain books that, like, you wouldn't be missing if you were a true crime aficionado, and I think that's what this book is going to be. And I'm delighted because I think we're getting, if not the first interview, one of the, I think it may be the first. And of course, Catherine is in the Cold Case Foundation with us.
Yep. And so don't miss that next Sunday night. It's a good way to segue out for this evening. We've been here 2 hours, and I promised my wife we would cut these shows back down a little bit shorter.
All right. Tell her it's my fault, Chris.
No, you're fine. We love you.
Oh, do you want to tell them a little bit about the classes and the book we're doing?
Yes. So I'll tell them about the classes, and you can tell them about the book. How about that? We're doing a series for the Cold Case Foundation, where
Mensa.
Mensa, exactly, where your folks are going to be able to go to the Cold Case. It's called the Cold Case Institute, and they're going to be 30-minute vignettes of various different things, and Gary's going to break down his book and different things, as well as many other things. As you can tell, I'm like everybody else in the chat. I could sit here for days and listen to Dr. Brucato. I mean, as you can tell, he's a fascinating human being. But I think what's important for people to know, thank goodness we have Dr. Brucatos in the world, because
I bet. Okay, if you say so.
I mean, because he deals with the worst of the worst, and to be in that a prestigious position to categorize these individuals because he can. It's always an honor to have him here, because if we take a look at Rachel's case objectively, we're both agnostic towards this. The tunnel is very interesting, but I know the way his mind works because I've known him a little more time now. He's gonna eat this until he gets this process, and then all of a sudden we'll have a couple more conversations, and he'll say, "What do you think about that?" And I'll go, like I did with Brian Koberger, long before he was on the air with him. He nailed that guy before they put a set of handcuffs on him. And I've always loved, guys like Gary, because they're not only so smart, but they're just down to earth. What you see with Dr. Brucato is that's how he is 24/7, 365. I mean, it's, Mensa jokes, the whole kit and caboodle is just how he is. And he is the most considerate, thought-provoking individual that I know, that Karen and I have, honored to call him a friend. And I hope you folks out there are also getting to know him even more and better. But that said, what's the book?
Oh,
what's the book?
Well, Chris and I, along with a very illustrious group of other authors who are all members of the Cold Case Foundation, including the leadership, have signed a contract now to write a book on a lot of different facets of cold case investigations, and I hope it will become a definitive book. I know the audience here will eat it up. There's no question. I don't really want to reveal what we'll be covering in there, but we'll be covering there, but without giving specific cases, we'll be looking at things like revisiting historical cases through the lens of contemporary analysis, trying to create linkages between cases that right now don't appear to be linked, the different tools that are used in a cold case, everything from DNA to every other trick in the book that is used to try to solve a case, looking at marginalized groups where cold cases are more common because you don't have the resources, like among Native Americans, for example. I really think it's going to be a great book, and we're just getting started on it. And I think everyone's going to love the courses for Cold Case Foundation. There'll be a small fee for that, but that'll be something that benefits
The foundation,
which is a great thing. I get that question a lot about autographing the book. What most people do is they send me a book plate, and then I sign it and send it back, so you don't have to mail a 600 some odd page book, and provide postage to send it back. It makes more sense to just send a label with a self-addressed stamped envelope. But I'm always happy to. Unfortunately, Michael Stone is not here anymore to add his signature. Since he passed away, I do have some copies here that he signed to me. But unfortunately, I can't do that. But by the way, Chris, I noticed that Matt has joined the chat, so he is here. It's like so. Hello to Matt.
Definitely. And Matt, it's great to see you. Hopefully you get to watch the rerun here. And thank you so very much for keeping your sister or your ex-wife's name out there as well. Michael did a great job tonight. I think you'll be proud of him. Okay, that said, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Our love to you. This is a great day to just be considerate one to another again. We've given the breath of life one more day. The great thing tomorrow is we get to open our eyes and try it all over again. Let's continue to support these families. And if there's anything that somebody may see or something they may know about this individual that's responsible for taking the life of Rachel Morin, please, please, please call the authorities and let them know. Call this number, 410-836-7788. That's 410-836-7788. With that, we'll have a great night. Aloha, as they say in Hawaii. And the other thing they say is biakamai, which means pay attention. Okay. Have a good night, everybody. We sure appreciate you. See you next week. Another great show.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a way.